In today's video, I'm going to show you the best beginner 3D printer and why it's better than the rest. So if you follow me on socials or you're familiar with my channel, you know that I've been 3D printing for almost 2 years now. In that time, I've had several printers and had to diagnose several issues and problems that come up, and this printer is just set above the rest. First and foremost, let's dive into the features and qualities that make this printer worth your money. The first of which is the unboxing experience. These printers are packed up incredibly well from the factory, so there's very small chance of anything breaking when it's getting to your house. As soon as I opened the box, I could tell that there's foam separating each layer, and the screws are in different labeled bags, so it's pretty hard to get confused when putting it together. They're separated from the frame on the top and the base in general. Those are the two main parts you'll have to put together, but it's nothing complicated, just a few bolts here and there, and you're pretty much good. So here is a closer look at the printer. The filament spool is just up above the filament sensor, and then it goes straight down to the hot end. You'll see as well here that this printer has a touch screen on this telephone wire. This makes it a lot easier to start up and stop prints and adjust them while they're going. This is the magnetic bed here. It just lifts up just like that and magnetizes right back on. Also, you have a lever here that when you pull back, it'll release the gear on the filament that's holding it in. So you just hold this down and pull the filament right out. On the side of the printer, you can see there's this little organizer for all of the tools you get. This was the very first print I did, and it came out great. There's a lot of options when it comes to modifying and making this printer even better than it already is, and I may be doing some of that in the future. Once this thing is put together, that leads us into a standout feature of this printer, which is the auto bed leveling. Now, usually on 3D printers around the same price point, there'll be little wheels underneath the bed that you'll have to twist manually, but because of the design of this particular machine, there are actually knobs in the front to adjust the belt tension and an option for auto leveling. If you don't know what auto leveling is, basically this print head will go to 32 different points on the print bed and determine what level it's actually at. That way the machine can save the data and always print level. This cuts out a lot of manual work, twisting knobs and adjusting things, and it just makes it easier to use. So if you don't know what it looks like when the auto leveling is taking place, here it is. It basically just goes from point to point, lowering itself and sensing how tall the distance between the nozzle and the bed is. This cuts out a lot of physical work that most people have to do with other printers. There's a bunch of fiddling with a bunch of wheels and adjusting settings and things like that just to get it started. This printer doesn't have any of that. The ease of use here is really incredible, especially since it's also a direct drive. As opposed to a normal Bowden tube setup, this printer actually has a filament sensor, and the filament goes straight down into the hot end. This basically means that there's going to be a lot less room for error, as a filament would be traveling through that plastic tube and down to the hot end. That feature alone eliminates a lot of headache when you're setting up your first 3D printer. Especially if you don't know the machines, it can be a lot harder. Now, on your normal printer, you'd have a Bowden tube which comes out of the hot end and follows your filament all the way back to the extruder gears. This eliminates that completely. It comes straight from the roll down through a filament sensor, down all the way to the hot end, where it then gets melted and squirted out of the nozzle. Speaking of a filament sensor, this printer has one here, and it makes life a lot easier. So if you're not familiar with what a filament sensor is, it's basically just detecting the filament moving through here, and when you get to the end of the roll, it will completely come out, and then that sends a signal to the printer to stop. Basically, all that means is when you run out of filament, it's not going to just keep printing in midair for no reason. It'll actually stop the print so you can put more filament in and resume right where you left off. For a beginner, this just means a lot less headaches. You're not going to walk away and run out of filament and come back and it's just going in midair for no reason. It's actually going to stop and let you know, hey, I need some more filament here. So that way you can change it and keep going. So let's talk about another great feature about this printer, which is the build volume. This is 225 by 225 by 280 in height, And it's especially great for a beginner because you can print things like a forearm, or you can print even full helmets on here. For super large projects like an Iron Man suit, you will have to chop it in some areas. This printer is not the biggest, but it doesn't sacrifice very much on quality. Now let's talk about a few parts that I printed with this machine that came out really good. In general, this printer is very high quality, and the prints that come off of it are as well. Here you can see the lower back portion on my Iron Man suit, and if you look closely at this, you can barely even see any layer lines, and the quality came out incredibly good. Here's that lower back piece closer up. You can see all the detail and lines here that came out really well off the Neptune 3. There's also some high detail areas in this forearm that came out pretty much perfectly. Now here's that close up. You can see in those little machine looking parts, those came out really well with no supports, and in the piece just in general came out really great. I've had 3 or 4 printers up until now, and this is by far the best in terms of quality. You barely have to dial it in at all, and it just comes out wonderful. This is another reason why I think this printer is great for beginners. There's not a whole lot of dialing in that you have to do, and it pretty much just comes out very smooth. This printer being so easy to use is one of the biggest reasons I think that beginners will enjoy it. It forgoes all of the headaches of setting it up, it's super easy to put together, and all around it's just a great printer. My personal favorite thing about this printer is how quiet it is. The fans are currently on right now as I'm filming this video, and I bet you can't even hear them. This thing is super quiet. When I started out, I had to have my printers in my bedroom with me, running overnight all the time, and they were pretty loud. With the Neptune 3 Pro, you don't have to worry about that at all. This thing is whisper quiet. Even if it's in the same room with you, you probably won't even know that it's running. The only thing you can really hear is the fans, and even those are incredibly quiet for a printer of this price. Sometimes I walk past my workshop and I forget that it's even on, or I think that it's not on and not running because I can't even hear it from outside the door. And even when I'm sitting right in front of it, this thing barely makes any noise. Compared to some of its competitors around the same price, that you just can't beat. If you're worried about customer service, Elegoo is actually known for their incredible customer service. I've actually talked to them a few times about this very printer, and they've been incredibly respectful and helpful. This printer is actually good for expert and intermediate hobbyists as well, just because of the ease of use and the great features that it has. So even if you've been printing for a couple years like me, you're probably going to love this thing, and I do as well. One last thing that I'd like to mention about this printer is the magnetic removable PEI bed. Now, as fun as this thing is to play with, it's actually incredible for bed adhesion, and when you've got a piece that's taking up most of this surface, you can just lift it up at the edge and it'll come right up. The bed adhesion on this printer is another standout factor. I've had prints before that I just go to touch it and the weight of my hand actually moves it, and it's not even stuck to the bed at all. This bed, when it cools down, it's incredibly easy to get the prints off. So that's another headache that you're avoiding by getting this printer. In general, the Neptune 3 Pro is by far the best that I have used so far, and I would definitely recommend it. One thing worth mentioning is if you do have the extra money, I may recommend getting the Neptune 3 Max for its added size and build volume, especially if you're doing something like a full suit of armor or any cosplay purposes. But you can definitely get that done on this just as well. In conclusion, the Neptune 3 Pro is incredible, and it produces very high quality items. It's very easy to use and perfect for any beginner. So whether you're just researching for your first printer or you're a seasoned veteran, this printer will not let you down. I'm currently using it for large armor parts such as the abs section of my Iron Man suit and many other parts. So that brings us to the end of this video. If you have any questions, pop those down in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos just like this. But until then, happy printing.